Hi there and welcome to this tutorial for motion matching for Unity. This is going to be a gameplay walkthrough, somewhat unscripted. It's not really my thing to provide gameplay support. However, it seems a lot of people have a lot of trouble with this and want example projects. And, I'd rather teach you how to do it than give example projects that aren't made for examples. So let's get right into it and let's create a new project. I'm using Unity 2020 1.6, I believe, and let's hit that. Now, so what are we going to do with this? I'm going to use Bolt. I'm going to be using Bolt for this because Bolt has recently been purchased by Unity and it is now free. Now, yes, I could go through and script, but I find it difficult to teach in tutorials with scripts. And also, I find that state machines are really hard to visualize, especially to someone watching in scripts. So I'd rather use Bolt, predominantly the state machine, visual state machines, and then you can see how to use it. Now, maybe you don't use Bolt, maybe you have something else, that's okay, or maybe you even want to script. That's still fine because Bolt simply calls functions from the MXM animator. So it's going to be exactly the same functions being called from MXM, so you could convert that to your script, or you can convert that to your other visual scripting language or asset or whatever. I'm just going to use Bolt. The point here is that you learn how to do things. Oh, this is lovely. This is actually the first time I've opened 2020 1.6, and it's got the dark theme. Isn't that nice? All right, so the first thing we're going to do, let's go to Package Manager. I'm going to skip through this all very quickly because I've been through this all in the past. However, some things have changed. We need to click on this here and go to Advanced Project Settings. So to turn on preview packages, because for some reason they haven't given the green light for jobs to be fully out of preview. Enable preview packages, I understand. You don't have to worry about that, by the way. I've had a few people have concerns. The features of jobs that MXM is using are stable as. I've never had them crash. Those jobs crash myself, and it's been using them for over a year now. So yeah, there's that. Let's go to our Unity registry and let's get a bunch of things. So we're gonna need, let's get so mathematics I think is built in, yeah, so we don't need that. We need collections. That might also be built in now. That is also built in. So we can just go for burst. So at least there's a lot less packages to install. So I think it's going to be burst and jobs, and that's going to do it. However, I am going to be getting Cinemachine because we're doing a kind of a little game project here. And I'm also going to grab Bolt, obviously. And I'll have to download MXM because I haven't got that downloaded in this project. I'm going to fast forward through all this. Okay, that's burst done. That took absurdly long for what it was. Let's go to jobs, and we are going to get the preview. Now, the jobs package that isn't preview is sort of automatically installed. However, we do need this iJob parallel for batch. That's what we use in MXM. MXM could avoid using it, but it's faster, so why wouldn't I use it? So let's install that. Did I install the right one? Yes. Fast forward. Zoop. Okay, that's jobs. Let's just get everything while we're here. Cinemachine, install, fast forward. Okay, we have Cinemachine now. The last thing we need is Bolt. Now, I think I'm going to have to go to my assets, and I'm going to have to sign in. Well, I shall be right back. I'll sign in quickly. Okay, I've just signed in, and it is refreshing those packages. So if you haven't already got Bolt, oh wow, I've got a lot of assets. Go to the asset store and get it. It's free, and it's owned by Unity, so it's going to be supported going in the future. I mean, like supported with inverted commas, and in Unity's special way. But the point is that you can get that for free. Okay, so here we go. Bolt. I've got it here. So if you had Bolt before, it used to be Bolt for Ludic. That was Ludic were the original creators. Now it's just Bolt. So this is the one I'm going to get. I need to download it. Fast forward. And then I'm going to import it. Okay, so Bolt's imported and just lovely. We get a whole bunch of warnings. That's great. That's just what we want. Okay, so next I'm going to get MXM, and I think I have MXM in my own assets. It's supposed to add it for me. Let's find out. Otherwise, I'll just load it Alrighty, here we are, opening Unity. Yes, I could have just downloaded the package that I have myself, but I'm on a different PC, so I'd rather just do it the way you guys would have to do it. It's added it now to my package manager. I'll hit download on that, and we shall import it, and I'm just gonna import everything. Okay, everything is imported. Now, I'm just going to give you a little bit of advice here, and it is not actually anything to do with MXM, but whenever you're making a game, don't go and import every single asset you have. You've got hundreds of assets and they're all cool and you're all just going to throw them in. Your game is going to chug. You want to sort of set up your gameplay and get your game working with a very minimum at first. I'm not going to add in Final IK or any of that stuff now. I'm just going to get what I need, which is MXM, some animations, and Bolt. So now we're ready to go. Let's get started. Now at this point you might be saying, but Captain Ken, why are you showing us all this stuff? You've got other tutorial videos for it. And the reason is because the number of times I get somebody messaging me directly saying, I get so many errors when I load it in, it's because you simply haven't looked at the quick start tutorial. So every time I do one of these tutorials, I've got to say that again. So don't forget to install your packages and all those prerequisites. I can't get them installed automatically. I tried that once with Unity's automatic package dependency thing. It's broken and so I'm not going to use it anymore. It actually breaks your project. So yeah, let's just quickly check that the MXM demo is working properly. Let's open that up. Here we are. We're not getting any warnings, which is nice. And I'm going to hit play, and besides the camera axis being off, which isn't really a problem, it seems to all be working just fine, and we can run around. So there we go. Latest version of Unity, it is working without any changes. Cool. So let's go to our own scene. I'm going to go to scenes in the sample scene, and I'm going to just call it just scene. I'm going to call it gameplay test. Now, we're not trying to make our character in our game environment. It's going to be too slow and too annoying. We're trying to make it in a test bed environment, a sandbox. And I highly recommend you do this if you haven't started practicing this. Make sandbox scenes for testing certain features. So maybe a locomotion sandbox. Maybe you have a shooting range to test your shooting stuff. It's just easier if you break things down, and then you could add other scripts that help you, like spawn enemies, so you can test that out as well. Don't do this all in your big game scene. All right, let's move on and start making our character. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually create an empty object. I'm not going to drag my character in because I don't want to use whatever model hierarchy my character uses. I want to control the hierarchy myself so I can do some useful things with that. So I'm just going to call this character. You can call it whatever you want. Not necessarily a player character. This could actually be used as a prefab for multiple characters, but we'll get to that later. And I'm just going to reset that to 0. Underneath my character, there's two things that's going to happen. I'm going to make a game object called behavior. Now this is where all the behaviors of my character come in, all the logic. So that's either AI logic or it's player logic. So the idea here is that I can actually swap in and out this behavior game object for AI and for the player, and it should technically work just by swapping it out, depending on your game, of course. And then I'm going to have another one, and this is going to be the model. However, I am going to drag this model in, so I'll actually delete that. And I'm going to use Robot Carl for now. He's obviously not the prettiest robot in the world, but he will do for the sake of this tutorial. Plus, he's easily accessible. And there he is. Just so that we can see things a little bit better, let's also create a plane, and I'm going to reset that and make that something like 10 by 10 by 10. And I do actually have a decent material to use with that. Let's find that, editor, resources, and proto grid, black. There we go, that will, no, the first one, that'll do. Okay, so there we go, we have our character, and we have our little gameplay test scene. Let's set a few things up on our character here. First of all, we're going to add a character controller. Now I'm just using the Unity one here. We'll put the Y up to 1 so that it's in line. If you're going to use your own, that's fine. Just you're on your own in that department. I can't do a tutorial for every single possible one out there. So yeah. Anyway, we're also going to need to add a generic controller wrapper, and I've already made one for Unity, and that is the Unity controller mapper. If you're using your own kind of character controller or capsule controller, people often get confused between character controllers and capsule controllers. For me, character controllers has always been the capsule, and a gameplay controller is those more advanced things that lets you do the jumping and the climbing and all that. That to me isn't a character controller. So when I say character controller, I'm referring to this capsule, okay? Anyway, here's this Unity controller wrapper, which we're going to need so that MXM can interface with it in a generic way. And then we're going to go to Robot Carl here, and he has the animated component here, and that's very important because wherever the animated component is, we want to add our MXM animator. So we add that alongside it, and we're not going to change a whole lot here. Except for options, we see this animation root override. Because the MXM animator isn't at the root of the character, we want to actually override it with the character root, just so that things are nice and dandy there. And we'll leave the rest for now. We are going to use the animation data, at least to start with, from the demo scene, but we might change it later on, but we'll get to that in a bit. So there, that is, let's add in the trajectory generator. You might think of this as logic and as a behavior, and you might think, well, I'll put it on the behavior. However, in this case, it's very specifically tied to the MXM animator. It's a way of conveying that input into animation. It's not used to actually move your character. So we'll leave that as that. And we'll come back to this in a bit. We're also going to need a root motion applicator, MXM root motion applicator. And we need a reference to our controller wrapper, and that's where that comes in. We'll drag the character, which had the controller wrapper component, so this one here, and we'll place that in there, and we'll enable gravity, and that's about it for that one. So yeah, there we go. That's pretty much it for a basic component setup of our character. If we press play, not a lot is going to happen at all. Our character is just stuck and we get a whole bunch of errors because we're not doing anything. So let's move on to the next part. Actually, let's go to the behavior, and we're going to need to add Bolt. Now, I actually have to install Bolt because when you import it, it imports this install Bolt thing. So let's import it. For me, it's net4. We'll import all of that, and we'll get it set up. Okay, then when we get to this, we can sort of just go through. I use programmer naming because I'm a programmer, and I'm just going to leave all this as default next, and I'll leave all that as default generate. Okay, so Bolt's finished being set up. We can actually go to this install Bolt folder and delete it. We don't actually need it anymore, and Bolt will still work just fine. So I'll delete that. We can avoid cluttering up our game. All right, so let's go to the behavior and let's add a state machine. So this is a Bolt state machine component. It's very useful. You'll see it adds this variables thing here, and we can add a whole bunch of variables. Now these are variables that belong to this object, and I'm going to actually add a bunch. So let's add in the MXM animator, because that's something we're going to need to access, and we can actually specify its type. We can say MXM animator, and there it pops up. That's the cool thing that I like about Bolt, is that it can access all your stuff. Now we're just going to leave that none. Well, we could actually drag in MXM animator here, but there's no point because we don't want to set up these rigid prefabs. We say we want to switch out this character at runtime. We're going to need to set these variables at runtime. So for now, it's just enough to name it and set what its type. We're also going to need the trajectory generator. So trajectory generator, and we can set that type. If you haven't noticed already, this tutorial is going to be mostly groundwork. Unfortunately, if you know what you're doing, then obviously you're going to be able to skip a lot of this, but I'm obviously making this tutorial for more beginners. So there we go. There we have that, and we need to make a new graph now. So we don't want to have it stuck to this asset. We want a separate asset that can be reused. So let's create a new one, and I'm going to put it under, let's go data, and then inside data, I'll say logic. I like to have everything that is data, so technically any scriptable object, any object that contains data in a data folder, and then I break that down to further things. So in this case, we have logic. There's going to be motion matching data, so I might as well make that while I'm here, motion matching folder for that. Anyway, let's go here and let's save this as player character logic. Or we could just say, yep, player character logic. That's actually fine by me. You could give it a title and a summary if you want. That's just to help you. We'll just hit edit, and you'll see here we have our state graph, and it's really simple. As a state, we can create new states. And now we're going to just be able to easily sort of visualize our logic, whereas before we were always coding with script, which is fine too. But yes, we're using this time. Okay. So that is the basic setup now. Let's go to set up our MXM animation data, because we actually need some data here to do something. Now, I am going to use a lot of the stuff that is already done in the MXM demo, just so that we can get started. We'll probably customize and go into that in later tutorials, but for now, we're just going to go to the demo under MXM plugin, go to data, and we're going to take out a bunch of animation modules. So this is data, motion matching modules, anim modules, and we're just going to go with the simple ones for now. So run anim, sprint anim, and walk anim. We'll just we'll just take those. I'm going to copy them under data, motion matching. Oh, where'd my folder go? It didn't want to create my folder for me. So I'll create another folder, motion matching. Okay, it has detected it, but I'm just going to re-import. There we go. There's my folder. And can I paste? I think I actually have to duplicate and then move it. So I'm going to duplicate it. And the reason why I'm doing this and not just drag them over is because I don't want to break the plugin stuff. So I'll drag those over. I'll create some modules, anim modules folder. I'll chuck those in there, and we'll rename those in a bit. We're going to need a few other things. We're going to need some data modules. So I'll make a folder for data modules. So it's very important. The number of times I see people's projects are really messy. Yeah, it might not matter, but it actually does a lot. A messy project is bound to have problems in several different ways. So just keep your stuff clean in a way that makes sense, and don't say, oh, I'm going to delete this later. Yes, I know this isn't related to MXM, but a lot of problems are actually user error, and this is one way to stop user error, is to keep your projects clean. So core modules, I'm going to make a config module. I'm going to make a new one, even though I can copy the other ones. So let's just make that. What other modules do we want? We're going to want a tag module, and let's also make an event module. This is all setting it up for later. We're actually not going to use most of these right now. So there we go. And I'll rename those later. Okay, so first things first, let's set up a config module. Actually, no. Let's create our MXM preprocessor, which is the most important thing. That's the thing we need to actually preprocess our data. Again, this tutorial is also, if you've watched some of the beginning tutorials, this isn't where you should start. If you're watching this and this is the first MXM video you're watching, you should probably go back, at least watch the quick start before watching this. Okay, so here we need to set up our target model. So our model is our robot Kyle. So where is he? Robot Kyle. Now it's important that it's the model, not the prefab. So you can see this prefab here. Don't drag in your prefab. You have to drag in the model because it's going to use it to preprocess the animation data. So where did I have that? Up here. I'll drag my model into game object up there. A pose interval of 0.1, it's fine. I'm going to go for 0.05. It's just something that I tend to be doing. And in fact, I'm going to use my MXM config module to override a bunch of things, which means that we can reuse this config module in a bunch of different places. You can see all of these are now overridden. So instead of setting them up in here, so the trajectory and the pose, we can now set them up in the module and then reuse that module anywhere else. So I'm going to chuck that config module in, and we'll continue with the config module, I'll grab the robot car model, and we can add trajectory points. I'm going to add 5. So negative 0.666 is usually how I split them up in even intervals, and 1, because I want 1 second in the future and I want the rest to be even. 2 past trajectory points with the negative, and 3 future trajectory points. Let's add a bunch of bones to match. A lot of the time you can get away with the left foot, the right foot. Where's the right foot? And a stable bone, so it could be the neck or the hips. The hips probably isn't going to be too useful. I'm going to actually go with the neck. We might add some more later. Let's try and keep it minimal for now. We want to pick the bones that drive the animation, not just every bone we have, because that'll just slow down the system. We want to pick as little as we can that's going to give the best effect we can. We might add more later, of course. Okay, so now we have that set up. Let's go to our preprocessed data. We've got our config module, so that's all nicely set up. We need some animation data. I'll do that last. And under tags and events, just so that we're set up properly for later, I'm going to override the tags and events. See, we can add them here ourselves, but I'm going to override them with our tag module and our event module, just so that when we want to do that later, we don't have to keep coming back to this. Lastly, I'm going to create a calibration module. So there's a lot of modules with MXM, and you might think it's a bit overbearing. However, it's made that way to be modular, of course, because it's not nice to have a very monolithic system. Motion matching is a very, very big system. So where am I looking? I'm going to gameplay, no, utility, calibration module. And it's better to have these all separate so we can chop and change. But yeah, motion matching is a big system. There's no way around it being a big system. It is going to be big. It is going to be complex. It not necessarily easy to use. Hopefully, with all these things, it gets easier and easier over time, but that's just the way it is. Okay. So we'll leave that for now as a calibration module, and we'll go back to here. This is all set up. We need to add some animation modules. Now we've already got these ones. I'm going to just rename these. I'll just take the 1 off. And remember to use these ones instead of the others. And let's go to our... I'm actually going to replace all of these here as well with the data modules. So the config module, the event module, and the tag module, just so that we're using the same ones for each of these anim modules. For the events themselves, it won't matter, and the config, not really. What does matter is the config in here, in this MXM preprocessor. The tag modules do have to match between them. If you're going to use them all together, they need to match. It's just the way that it is. Okay, so now that is done, let's go back to our preprocessor and we'll actually add all 3. So I'm going to lock this, drag in all 3 into composites. We can drag it into this section here. Sorry, not composites, animation modules, so the top one. So you can add animations directly into the preprocessor. I don't recommend it. That's the old way of doing things. That's kept for legacy, but we'll add in the animation modules, and you can see them here. Now we can split up our animation sets into these modules, which is very nice. And you can see that I was able to just reuse the modules that I had previously created. We will go through creating our own modules and going through composites later, but I want to get this character up and running quickly rather than go through every single step. There's already tutorials for that. Okay, preprocessed data. So we've got our configuration, we've got our animation modules. We are going to need an idle set, and I believe the walk animation has an idle set in it already. So I'll unlock this. Yeah, it has 2 idle sets, 1 for each different foot forward. Let me just double check the tags. So there's no tags on that one, no tags on that one. Okay, that is cool. Don't worry about this if you don't understand it. That'll all come with time. All right, so we'll go to our preprocessed data. Let's just get the file path for this folder that we're going to use, because we'll need to tell it where. I'm going to click preprocess animation data, and we'll go to this folder under motion matching. Let's create our MXM data asset. I recommend you actually name these something specific. It's not very good to have a whole bunch of the same name. Often when I see people's projects, they've got an MXM anim data of their own, and if you do a search, it's going to kind of like, watch this. If I do a search, MXM anim data, I'm going to get multiple named the same, because even in my demo, it's called MXM anim data. So name it for yourself. I'll do that later, probably off recording. And we can see we've got this calibration here. Now, you used to set up all calibrations on the MXM anim data because it's tied in with the number of, the left foot, the right foot, and the neck. However, the new way of doing it is with the calibration modules, because when this gets pumped with so many different poses, so 46,000 poses, this can be very slow to edit. So for example, I just hit 4 and it took about 3 seconds for that number to change. So this is the old way of doing calibration sets. We now use the calibration modules, and we can add our own. We just need to set the target anim data so that this calibration module knows which bones it needs to have calibration for. So it's going to ask you, do you want to copy calibration data from the new source anim data? If we say yes, it's just going to copy. Okay, that didn't work. I'll have to look into what happened there. Let me just deselect it and select it. So that's a workaround. I will see what's going on there and try and fix that for next update. But just click off it and click back on, and that will be there. So we got calibration 0. I'm just going to call this general. This is a general locomotion. I'm going to add another one called sprint. We're not going to change the values here just yet. We'll change them later. I'm just setting this up for now. So we've got the sprint calibration and the general calibration. Let's go to our character. If we go to Robot Kyle, you'll see the MXM animator. We'll go to animation data, and we want to drag in our animation data that we created, and we want to drag in our calibration module into this calibration override. So now it's going to use the calibrations from here instead of the anim data. So this is all pretty much set up. We've got an update rate of 83. So let's set the update rate to 30. So it's only going to update every, at 30 frames per second. Now that's not the frame rate of your game. That's the frame rate of motion matching searches. The lower you set this, so the fewer updates, the better for performance. But if you set it too low, it's not going to be crazy responsive. I'd consider setting it to 10 or 15 or something, but we'll leave it at 30 for now. Blend channels, I'm going to set that to 10. I wouldn't worry about Y at this point. Let's have a look, go through options, pose matching method, velocity costing, that is good. That's the higher quality one. We're going to leave that. Root motion, we are using a root motion applicator, so I'm going to set root motion to root motion applicator. Past trajectory mode, actual history, for now that is fine. Blend space smoothing, we're not using blend spaces, so none. Transition method, blend, that's fine. Blend out early, we're using mocap, so we don't need that. That's a cut clip thing, blend out early. Transform goal, yes. Favorite kind of pose, no. Good. Okay, we'll leave the rest of that the same. Warping, we shall leave but on its own for now. And that's about it. If I hit play, we should, if I haven't forgotten anything, be able to now run around. And there we go, our character can run around, and without really much calibration, it's working pretty well. Of course, the anim modules have tags and stuff, but this is just with the default calibration. I'm pretty happy with that. We're not really going to trigger any sprinting. Let me just get my controller and see if we can do some walking. There we go, there's some walking. We're not using any input modules yet. We'll get to those later. You'll see it'll probably be a bit funny. See there, it doesn't know whether it wants to run or walk. When the stick is sort of halfway between running and walking, it's like, do I run? Do I walk? I don't know. So that's where the input profiles are going to come in later for the trajectory generator. But I think that's a pretty good start. We've got our character going. Let's check our gizmos. Yep, there's our character controller. We can see our motion matching gizmos. It's actually matching really well with just those 3 points. We might keep it that way for quite a while. So yeah, that is the first steps to setting up a character. Now this character is obviously going to be a lot more robust than just chucking in the model, because we've got this set up. Let's see, is there anything else we're going to do in this tutorial before we end and leave the rest for the next one? Give me a moment. Okay, so there is a little bit we're going to set up. We're just setting up more and more framework. I want to get things in a nice framework before we really get into the detail of stuff. So we're going to need a camera, obviously. Let's create a Cinemachine camera. So Cinemachine up here, and let's create, we want a free look camera. So that is the free look camera. And for now, you'd probably do this with code, but for now, I'm just going to drag in the character here, and it's going to follow the character. And let's see if we can split this so we can tell. Okay, so that's the view we're currently getting. It's looking at the feet. I think it's added our Cinemachine brain. So if we go to our main camera, it's automatically added the Cinemachine brain. So there's a few things we want to do here. This update method, it's got smart update. It figures out when it should update. Let's put it this way. With MXM, if you're using root motion, in fact, whether it's MXM or not MXM, if you are using root motion, the movement is going to occur at the end of the animation update. So that's after the normal update and before the late update. Now your camera has to update after the movement happens. Otherwise it's going to jitter. So with MXM, I pretty much always set update method to late update. You got this blend update method, which is already on late update, so we'll leave that. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the Cinemachine brain. Really important, otherwise you will get stuttering. Let's go back to the free look, CM free look 1. I'm just going to put this further up here so that it's out of the way. And we can go over here. Let's have a look. I'm just going to go to the top rig. And I'm going to go to all these rigs. So top rig, middle rig, bottom rig. Now this isn't a comprehensive tutorial on how to use Cinemachine. This is just some. Basically, depending on how high your camera is, whether you're looking top down, in the middle, or from the bottom up, it's going to use these different rig settings and it'll blend between them. We're just saying how we want to offset the look point to be off the ground. So maybe more like 1.5. Yeah, 1.4 maybe through the chest. And I'll set that the same for the bottom rig and the top rig. And we need to be a bit further back. So the radius of this rig is going to be, let's make it 5. Make this a little bit bigger. 5, let's make it 7. 6 is good. I'm just going to take a guess and make these ones 2. The height, I'm pretty happy with that height. I think that's pretty good for now. Not going to play with, there's a lot of settings with Cinemachine and it can be extremely fiddly, so I'm not going to go through all of that now. The only thing we need to change here still is this, so orbits, binding mode. I think world space from memory is the one that we want. Now, the inputs are mouse X and Y. Let's hit play, see what happens. I don't know what this is with the new Unity. So, okay, so this is pretty good. As I rotate the camera, yeah, I'm pretty happy with these settings. This is really just to get things going. I'll leave it up to you guys to change everything the way you want it in your perfect game that you're making. I'm just going to, so hang on, my Y is inverted. So let's invert the Y. I'm going to check save during gameplay. Actually, no, I'll just remember. So invert the Y. The left and right is fine. So the Y-axis invert. And I'll get rid of that drawing, turn the gizmos off. Yeah, I don't know what that little load thing is every time you hit play mode now. Okay, so there's only one weird thing, of course. Now that we've got a camera that we can rotate around the character, it's a little too unsensitive. I'll play with these settings off screen. That's not really part of the tutorial, really. You get the idea of how that works. But we do need to go to our trajectory generator because we want our input to always be relative to the camera. And so what we need to do is we need to pass in the camera transform, which is here, so that when the trajectory generator takes our input to generate that trajectory, it's generating it relative to the camera's view direction. So you probably didn't notice that, obviously, because you're not pressing the buttons on the screen, but now it makes sense. So I'm pressing forward, and even when the character is not, I'm still just holding W, so turning the camera actually is turning the character here. So before that wasn't happening, even though you wouldn't have seen that. So there we go, that is Cinemachine set up. One more thing that I do want to set up is under behavior, we've got this state machine, but you might not want to go all in with visual scripting, or maybe you do, or maybe you don't. I don't want to go all the way in. I want to use it to call the occasional function from MXM or the trajectory generator, and I want to use it for the state machine logic. The scripting can be convenient, but I'm going to want to convert a lot of that to actual C#, just to improve performance a little bit in the long run, and even just so that later on I can convert some of my visual scripting into C# when I'm trying to make things more performant. So I'm going to create a new script for that, and we're going to call this so player logic. Now this isn't even going to have an update function necessarily, not one that's automatically called by a mono behavior. I'm going to allow my my state machine to update that only in the states that I want it to update. That way I can have multiple different types of updates that do different things. Let's create a new folder for scripts, of course, and just to keep things tidy, and we'll put player logic in there. Once we get more scripts, we'll probably want to make even more. I don't know what this is with the new Unity. It wants to load all the time. It's really annoying. Anyway, sorry about that. Let's add that here. So let's call this player logic, and we'll add that there. Now, one thing you need to know is that whenever you create new scripts, change a function or anything, you need to reinitialize Bolt. So we need to go to Tools, Bolt, and go to, where is it? Build unit options. Is it that one? Update unit options. So build will rebuild all unit options. Update unit options is just when you change some things. So now that we've updated unit options, we should be able to see functions from Bolt in our script. I'm just going to open up this script, and while that's opening, okay, so here's our graph. And I'm going to create a new state. It will have a state already, but I think I deleted it. And in the state, we've got these on enter, update, and on exit. Now, the cool thing is I should just be able to call a function from here. So let me go to my script that I've just created. Here's my player logic. I'm going to get rid of the mono behaviors. It's still going to be a mono behavior because it's a component, but I'm going to have my own updates. So let's call this public void update locomotion, or update general, whatever you want. For now, this is just what I'm going to do. So we're going to call this initialize behaviors. Oh, I'm getting too used to coding in C++ and Unreal. I forgot the public there. Okay, so I'm going to leave those blank. I'll go back to Unity, and it's going to load again. And we'll go to Tools, Bolt, Update Unit Options. And then we can go to our graph. In our start state, we can do some things. Okay, so unfortunately, Bolt is giving me troubles. So here we go, and we can go player logic. So we can search for that script, and we can choose one of these functions, update locomotion, and for example, do enter. We can say player logic, and we can call that function initialize behaviors. Now, I'm just doing this to show you. I'm obviously going to change it a little bit. this set up when we get more into the logic. So I'll delete that for now because they're actually not going to do anything. Just know that that's there. This is all set up. We're all set up. Our framework is now completely set up. So sorry if you had to bear with me setting that up. Next tutorial, we're going to get into a lot more detail of implementing things. So for now, we've just got a character that runs around. It's not particularly stable. We can't really control it very much. We'll have a look into calibration. We'll have a look into how we can set up a speed ramp to differentiate between walk and run. I'll show you the tags set up for that, which is the tags are already set up, but I'll show you how that is set up so you understand it. Understand the speed ramp. Use input profile so that we can differentiate between walking and running. And we might implement a sprint. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the framework though. I think this is actually really important, even if, you know, this seems boring. Having this good framework will save you a lot of time down the line. You might have other things later on. You'll have even other sub-game objects. The point is not to clog up any single one with too many scripts. I think this one is going to have a fair few because it's alongside the MXM animator. That's okay. I don't have a problem with that. But yeah, so there we go. There is our framework. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next tutorial. Hopefully we can get through making something really cool. Put in the comments down below what kind of features you want this character to have. Should it be shooting? Do you want me to do an example of jumping? Do you want me to do an example of falling or taking cover or something? Obviously, I'm going to pick things that are simpler first, and we're going to build up to more complex things. But yeah, let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video.